My name is Elizabeth Cheney, and I'm proud to serve on New York MBA's Education Committee alongside with my co-chair, Bill Kennedy. Before we dive into today's session, I would like to quickly highlight some exciting educational opportunities we have coming up. We have our Affordable Friday series this week on the 21st, featuring Brian Burgess on VA lending. And early next month on December 3rd, we have Mary O'Brien with Happy Homes joining us to discuss net zero construction technology. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Number one, if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, please notify us using the chat function. All participant lines are muted except for our presenters. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the session using the chat or Q&A functions. After the webinar, we'll share the presentation slides and relevant resources with you. Stay connected with New York MBA. You can find us on LinkedIn at nymba.org and on our YouTube channel at NY Mortgage Bankers Association, where we post webinar recordings such as this one. Lastly, I urge all mortgage professionals to consider joining the Mortgage Action Alliance. It's free, easy, and a fantastic way to stay informed about legislative issues that affect our industry. And now I have the pleasure to introduce today's host of our 10 on Tech series, Jackie Garazalek. Jackie is a partner of Pearson and Ferdinand. Jackie serves as a trusted advisor to businesses, helping them navigate the complexities of cyber incidents from initial intrusion through notification and recovery. She's on the board of directors here at the New York MBA and a board member of the NENY MBA. So Jackie, I'll have you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We're always excited for 10 on Tech. And today we're particularly excited because we have one of my favorite guests, James Carroll. James, I am going to give you just a minute to introduce yourself and your company.
Cool. Sounds good. No, excited to be here, Jack. I know we've done a lot of very memorable speaking engagements in the past together, so looking forward to another great one. But I'm James Carroll. I'm the founder of Hackett Cyber. We are a offensive security, cybersecurity consulting firm. So we focus on really just like 9 things. It's all pen testing, ethical hacking focus. So if someone, has a compliance requirement or regulatory obligation to come and have someone do pen testing, we do that. If they just want, a team of hackers to come in and emulate what actual hackers are doing, that's what my team specializes in. But based out of Syracuse, New York, not too fond of the weather right now, not too fond of Syracuse football right now, but I do like Syracuse basketball. I think they had a promising, hopefully promising season ahead of them. But no, excited to be here. Appreciate it, Jackie.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you got to focus on the good. I'm not excited
That's all
about
right.
all the weather either, but
That's
here
right.
we are. All right, our session today is called What the Tech Are You Talking About? And this is just a short primer, basically for maybe the not so tech savvy or leaders of industry here that have to talk to their technical team. And we're going to go through just 9 or 10 questions that kind of hit on both sides of cyber, both offensive and defensive. So the questions we're going to see here today are questions that organizations are going to get if they have a cybersecurity incident. So just as like a quick play-by-play, if you have an incident, you probably call your insurance company. Your insurance company assigns counsel, which could potentially be my firm or some other incident response firm. And then we pull in a digital forensics company. And these are some of the questions that you're going to be asked as part of that incident response. And then on the flip side, these questions could also be used for leaders to talk to their technology teams so they have a better idea of what their cybersecurity posture looks like and some things that they should be looking for that are common exploitations by cyber criminals. So let's get going. First question, James, what is a firewall?
What's a firewall? I love these questions because it challenges me to take something that I think of as very technical and then translate it to, like what does it mean to like executives and non-technical
Yes.
folks? And that's fun. That's fun for me. That's where I make a lot of my living is doing that type of stuff. But so a firewall is we'll say it's a product that controls what someone from outside the network can see inside of your network. So a great example is, let's say you work for a company. From the outside, you can probably see your website or maybe like a document portal or something like that. But you can't see like computers. You can't see your workstation sitting in your office from, your house just by going to your website. That's essentially what that is. We've been seeing a shift in the last 5 or 6 years, like a lot of industries where a lot of organizations are moving from what we call like the on-premise infrastructure. So, a lot of people, think about 5 years ago, you probably had an office. You'd have to use a VPN to gain access to your office. The VPN would actually, it's used by the firewall. So you'd bypass the firewall using your credentials to get inside of the network and then access your work data. Nowadays, a lot of that's in the cloud. So you're using Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and all these online services, which eliminates the need for a lot of those services that you would have to get within a firewall. There's obviously a huge convenience factor for that. You don't have to, you can, the same user experience is there at your house versus if you're at a physical office. But with that becomes a lot of security concerns as well because everything is so accessible and it is so easy to use. There's security concerns like what are you doing on that computer? Is your endpoint configured correctly? Is every not just as your firewall, but is everything patched? And those are things that we've been helping a lot of customers traverse over the last 5 years is understanding that risk and understanding as they're moving to more of what I used to call it the West Coast network because we always saw it on the West Coast. I'm like, yeah, you guys got a West Coast network. You when those hipster tech companies out there now, it's like everyone's doing it. But we're seeing that, like they're basically cloud centered networks more and more now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think over the last kind of, starting in July, going forward from the incident response side, we've seen a lot of incidents originate at the firewall with those VPN access points. And we're seeing, like you said, a lot of organizations that have transitioned over to cloud-based environments, but still have left that VPN access there to whatever, remaining infrastructure. And they're not maybe patching it as much as they should. They're not, they don't have MFA deployed on their VPNs. So, we saw in August a particular type of VPN, particular type of firewall that was being exploited, and the maker was pushing out patches, but maybe they weren't making it to the actual infrastructure. So what is the importance of having a patch schedule but also having the ability to push out those patches when needed?
It's important, and like I think I know the one you're talking about because I'll tell a little story with that story, and this was actually like
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. Was we're actually doing it was a customer we had. We just onboarded them, and it was our first test ever, and their first pen test ever, using an outside firm. And it was supposed to start on like a Wednesday at 9 a.m. is when we agreed upon. And then Tuesday night, like someone got into the network, they exploited the firewall and they corrupted the firewall. They basically did what they had to do, ransomed it, and then corrupted the firewall. And they came in the next morning and they called me like, hey, did you guys do any testing that would like involve corrupting our firewall? I'm like, no, we didn't do that. Like, oh, like we gotta hold off then because everything's down. It's a mess. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's not good. And then I was like, what make is your firewall? And they told me, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of patches that got released for that. Did you guys patch it? He's like, I don't know. That's our MSP or that's our MSSP, and it wasn't patched and it got exploited. But
yeah,
yeah, and normally, like if a lot of these vendors will release these critical updates and they'll shoot you some kind of notification. It's typically through email, which can be frustrating, especially if
mhm,
you get a lot of emails. But there's also different threat feeds you can subscribe to where they'll bombard you with stuff. Like I get texts, a lot of texts now from like when critical vulnerabilities are released. But and that goes hand in hand with like organizations that they have kind of the Swiss Army knife guy, like the operations officer is also
I
doing
like that.
IT. Yeah, he's also doing IT, and it's like he's got a lot of stuff going on, and he's not always, got his eyes on his email looking for these types of alerts. That's why I'm always recommend like, hey, if you're a growing company and you have a Swiss Army guy, like take IT off him and use a dedicated provider like an MSP for that to avoid situations like this.
Yeah, exactly. And then have those conversations with the MSP as far as, poke a little, some holes and say, how are you going to handle this? So that they know you're on top of it and so that you're truly on top of it. All right, cool. And then next question, and this goes hand in hand with what you just talked about. One of the questions that you'll receive in an incident response is, what's your email infrastructure? Are you on-prem? Are you cloud? And kind of what does that mean?
Yeah, so on-prem is your email means your email's on premise. We very rarely see this these days. We still encounter the Exchange organization, which I almost feel like the subscription model, like the cloud-based email that Microsoft offers, was an inside job because of like all the Exchange vulnerabilities that happened like 3 years ago. Like it has to be an inside job. They had to have done that, but Exchange had like a really hot streak of vulnerabilities that got released and it was getting hacked all the time. Exchange is an on-premise email system that Microsoft offers. Most people are using cloud-based email, so like Outlook 365. When you go to log into the web, you log into Microsoft, you have Teams, you have that whole suite. That's all cloud-based email. And from our testing, like what we found is, especially when we do a lot of phishing engagements, so customers hire us to go and like send out malicious emails to their users to get them to do something they're not supposed to do. When there's on-prem email, like we never even like getting by spam filters never crossed our mind for the longest time. I've been doing this for 11 years now. For the first 6 years, we never thought about like, man, we got to do something about a spam filter. It just always got through. The second people switch to cloud-based email, Microsoft just has things built into it that outside of like even using a Proofpoint or Avanan or Mimecast that does a pretty good job at detecting spam. So as soon as people switch to that, we learned very early on like we're gonna have to change something here because it's hard to get emails through the spam filter now. But we've noticed just like the feature set and the robustness and the granularity of these cloud-based systems like Outlook 365 to be much better than the old on-prem options.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely get to take advantage of the security features that Microsoft is being pushed to do as well, as opposed to whatever you're doing internally. So, perfect. Um, this is one that we see every single day. We'll have a conversation with an organization after they have an incident, and we'll say, "Do you have MFA deployed on your environment?" And when we talk about an environment, we don't just mean, "Do you have it on your email?" It's across the environment on every different system that MFA is available. But is it enabled or is it enforced, and are there exceptions? Um, and many times the response is going to be, "Yep, we've got MFA." And then when you dig a little deeper, it's like, the MSP gets on and they're like, "Yeah, we've got it turned on. Oh, but also the CEO doesn't have it because he likes to work in Florida and doesn't like to deal with that extra step. So he's an exception." So give me some insight on that.
Yeah, and we hear that all the time too, and that's one of the biggest risks and root causes for BEC, which is business email compromise, which is an attacker going in and getting remote access to an email account. Typically they'll change around some forwarding addresses so that if you get an email from your accountant, instead of going to you, it's actually going to get forwarded to another mailbox that the attacker controls, and then they'll actually respond or go into a folder that you don't see, or they'll do some nefarious activity like that. But yeah, what Jackie described, like, hey, we're gonna give people exceptions. The issue is like no one should get exceptions. The bigger issue is hackers are gonna go after the CEOs, the CFOs, the C-suite the most. They are the highest value targets because they have the most data in the organization. So by allowing the executive level people to have weaker security controls is incredibly counterproductive because they're the ones getting targeted. If it's an intern, it's different. To CEO, it's a huge deal. It's still a big deal if it's an intern, but the CEO is obviously high risk. So when we talk about enabled or enforced, we do a lot of our assessments are focused on Outlook 365 and Azure and those platforms. And Jackie, you can probably count a lot of times where you go into an organization, it was business email compromise. Well, do you guys use MFA? Yeah, we use it. Is it enabled or is it enforced? It can be enabled, but with O365 and Microsoft, there's conditional access policies that you have to review. So an example is it might only be enabled for suspicious logins. So if unless you're logging in from Romania or Russia, it might not trigger, or it might be enabled for certain circumstances, like if you're logging in through an app or a third-party application, it might require it. It needs to be required all the time. And the conditional access policies are great in some cases, but a lot of times it actually lessens the security for that account. The other thing that we find a lot of times during our engagements is uh, no single sign-on. And that's been very dangerous because think about like all of the applications and websites you log in on a daily basis just to do your job, just to do your work. Um, you're probably creating accounts at, Salesforce, and you have your work account, and you have, I don't know, the mortgage platform and the loan applications and all that stuff you have different logins for. Well, now you have to enable MFA for all of those services, and you have to rely that the MFA for all those services uh, is strong. We've been seeing a big shift now, especially with all the cloud services, where people pushing through what's called SSO or single sign-on. So you have one platform, you hook up all your applications you use from business for this one platform, and you log into one place with one MFA and one really good password, and then you get access to all of your applications. So it's kind of your dashboard for everything you need to use for work. And that's been a solid security step just to not just enhance security, but also the ease of use of these types of platforms.
Yeah, and you made a great point there as far as having so many different accounts. One of the things that we're seeing it, it exploited right now is the edge. Uh, can't think of the name of it, but essentially Edge is storing all of your credentials, and the threat
Oh,
actors are
yeah.
going in, pulling all of those credentials from Edge, and using them to then have access to your platforms.
Yep. And that's another that brings up another good point. Something that we're seeing as well is like ransomware is still big, but one of the largest growing ones is what's called stealer malware logs, where attackers go in and they infect you. And instead of ransoming your data, they steal all your browser passwords because people store passwords in their browser all the time. So they steal all those
Browser.
browser passwords, yeah, and then they use those to then log in. Think about like how much stuff you probably save in your browser. Like there's probably passwords. It's not uncommon to have like social security numbers stored in there. Like you just fill out a form. It says, "Do you want to save it?" You hit save, which is actually a vulnerability in the application that we test for. But you hit save, and then it's in your browser, and then someone hacks your browser and they get everything.
Yeah, exactly. Um, all right. So when I started in cyber in 2017, I think that the number one thing that people said was the cure all is MFA. Like you have to have MFA. That's what's going to save us. So on and so forth. And when people ask me now, what's the number one thing I should have, and it's backups. For me, it's backups because backups give you the opportunity if you have a ransomware incident to not have to pay the ransom because you don't have to pay for a decryption tool. You've got good backups. And it just that's how you're going to get back up and running. But many times we get on those calls and we say, "Do you have backups?" And they're like, "Yes, but we haven't quite been able to get into them yet." So why are all backups not created equal?
There's a lot of reasons, and honestly, and I'm a big like rubber meets the road guy. Like, show me the technical stuff. My opinion on the backups is honestly it's policy based. Like it's an internal policy of why they aren't created. There's a lot of great tools that do backups, and I think a lot of organizations now know enough to like, hey, do backups off site. You know what I mean? So if we get encrypted, they can't access the backups. What we're seeing though is people don't test their backups. So what I mean by that is, let's say you get ransomed, you get the note, it says pay us $1 million or we're not giving you the keys, and you go, thank God I got backups. Well, you go to backup, you go to use your backups, you haven't tested them before, and they're corrupted or they're not right, or you didn't back up the right system, or it's not the same frequency that you want. Which is why we always recommend like, hey, you can have backups, that's great, but make sure on a regular basis, whether it's once a quarter or twice a year, you go through a tabletop or some type of exercise to say, let's test to make sure these backups are working. Let's back up a couple, let's implement the backup for a couple workstations, a couple servers, just to make sure it works, make sure it's what we're expecting. So if this does happen, we know what to expect and we know our backups are working.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing now more, and I'm not going to get this tech exactly right, so please correct me, that when a threat actor gets into your environment, they're encrypting at, they're erasing the backups and then encrypting at the disk level so that when you're looking in to see if you have the backups, you can't actually tell, and then they're not there anyway, even if you're able to unencrypt.
Correct. Yeah, that's the one thing they'll look for is they encrypt everything, then they look to find the backups. So when they find the backups, they'll either delete them or encrypt them as well. So it's like, well, I have backups, but they're encrypted. We actually, this was like years ago, but it was just a fascinating story. Is we did one organization in they went away for like, it was like a CPA firm, so they're off like I can't remember, like the 4th of July week or something. They all take off, and they came back and they had ransomware infected in on their machines, and all the backups were encrypted. So they said, okay, well, we'll just pay the ransom, we'll decrypt it. Well, they paid the ransom, they decrypted it just to find that a day before that ransomware came in, someone else, another ransomware actor came in and encrypted it. So they
Mhm.
encrypted it to find that there's another ransomware organization that already encrypted it. So it was called the old double ransom. You had to pay to get that encrypted, and then they found the ransom note for the other organization, pay them to get decrypted, and they finally got the data.
Yeah, and I mean with the new kind of, ransomware business structure, because they're very savvy business people, we are seeing more of that because we're seeing the ransomware as a service and we're seeing the affiliate model where essentially these groups go in, and pay the larger organization to get these credentials, to then do their attack. So they have, there's no there's nothing that says you can't sell it twice.
Yeah,
Um, so different groups end up with their credentials to different environments.
for sure. For sure.
All right. My example here, do we have EDR and is it monitored? Because many times we'll have an organization say, yes, we've paid for, XYZ service, we have EDR, but the alerts are coming in at 3 a.m. and nobody's monitoring it. So they've got from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. When somebody gets in the office for all the bad stuff to happen.
Yeah, and that's dangerous, and that's something we honestly see a lot of is, like there's a, do you have EDR? If it's free, it's probably not EDR. EDR is something that is not just like looking at files, but it's looking at behavior. It's looking at actual like heuristics of your computer to say, like, hey, why is it doing this? Hey, this user doesn't normally do this, so why are they doing this now? And is that malicious? And then they'll take action on that, or they'll send notifications on that. A very common configuration with EDR is what we call basically passive mode. So there's two types of features. You can do active mode, which basically says, hey, EDR, go and anytime you see something suspicious, take the computer offline. And it's strong because if someone does something bad, their computer gets taken offline and prevents further infection. But there's also the world of false positives that we live in where, hey, they might be doing something legit and then they get taken offline and it might be 6 a.m. on a Saturday and they got a report due on Monday and now they can't use their computer all weekend because IT isn't around. So what's the alternative? The alternative is they go, we'll just put it in passive mode or reactive mode and we'll get the alerts through IT or through your operations person. We'll get that and then we'll go in and investigate. Kind of like what Jackie alluded to is the issue we're seeing there is, it's 9 a.m. on a Saturday, someone gets infected, IT gets an alert, they don't come in until Monday, they got all weekend now to go and do whatever they want, and then IT comes in on Monday and it's too late. Then your board or your executive saying, well, we just paid, $250,000 for CrowdStrike, why didn't it do anything? And it turns because hey, we didn't have anyone monitoring it. We were using in reactive mode. So what I always tell people is you're spending all this money and you're doing all this effort to implement a best of breed product in this space. Why not spend a little bit more just to have someone monitor it? And then you'll have the peace of mind knowing like no matter what time of day is, no matter where I am, if I'm on vacation, if I'm at my kid's softball game, someone's looking at the dashboard of these alerts and they're going to take action on it. And that's been one of our biggest recommendations and like what we call our assumed compromise and red team engagement models is just use somebody to monitor it. They like, well, we have internal people that do it. Like, okay, so you're paying someone 9 to 5, and their job is to stare at the screen. What happens between 5 to 9? What if you get infected? Well, nothing's gonna happen. Like, we don't monitor it. Get someone to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then, that kind of goes back to an internal policy perspective as well. When you're writing these policies for your security features, you have to think about essentially giving permission for the tech people to do what the tech people do. It can't be, you can only pull this computer offline if you're able to get a hold of the CEO. That's the only person that can give you permission. Well, when the CEO is at the basketball game or whatever the case is, and you've got hours in between there where there's no authorization, that's becomes a problem. All right. Do you have an asset inventory? Thoughts on asset inventories?
It's in my opinion one of the most overlooked part of information security, and the reason for that is asset inventory has historically been tribal knowledge. So it's the IT guy that's been there for 15 years. He's like, I know where everything is. I'm good to go. When he retires or, gets laid off or someone comes in and replaces him, it's like, well, like, what systems do you have to update? If you don't know what you have, how do you know what you need to protect? You can't possibly do it. And like we do a lot of testing across a bunch of different verticals, and my favorite ones for asset inventory are colleges because they have so much stuff. And you go in there and there's you're like, yeah, we got like 1,200 machines. Like, well, how come I found like 4,800 machines across like 8 different networks? And like, oh yeah, well, we didn't realize like the library has that, and there's building controls, and there's Bursar's office, and there's theaters and weather stations and labs, and all sorts of things. Like we didn't even account for any of that stuff. But you need an asset inventory so like, hey, this is what we own, this is what we need to protect, this is what we need to install our EDR on and make backups of. Because if you don't, you're essentially shooting in the dark.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that actually goes back to the M365 question as well. So many times we have a call with a client and we say, how many employees do you have? 25. How many accounts do you have? How many emails do you have? 150. Well, what's the delta between your 25 employees and your 150, M365 accounts? I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions to ask. And it's like, oh well, we have a bunch of contractors, we have a bunch of seasonal people. Okay, well, like, what computer do they have? Is it your computer? Is it their computer? Well, it's our computer. Okay, so why isn't that in your asset inventory? Or like, oh well, it's they can use their own computer to access our device. Okay, well, do you have an MDM? Are you doing anything to make sure that they're not, doing suspicious things on that device while accessing your data? And that opens up a lot of other conversations from a security perspective that people are like, wow, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. Always opens a can of worms. Um, this one, where is your cyber insurance policy? So I wanted to just throw this in here because we deal with so much ransomware, and many times an organization they'll have a ransomware incident and they'll be like, we're a small business. Like, why is the ransom request 5 million? And we're like, because you stored your cyber policy in your environment. They found it and they ransomed you for exactly what you have for your cyber insurance. So just quick recommendation, don't store your cyber insurance policy in your network.
Yeah. That's like giving the attackers like the answer key of how much they want. There's a site that it's called ransomware.live, and they have chat logs that people share of the ransomware actors. And one of the ones that I was actually, when I present in my slide, is like, hey, we need a $4 million, we need to be $4 million. Like, oh, we only have like 200 grand. Like, yeah, well, that's not true because and they'll send them, here's a copy of your policy that says you have
Yeah.
up to $4 million in coverage. So pay us $4 million. And they're like, oh, well, I guess, I guess they got me there. But yeah, we see that a lot. And then I'm always interested, Jack, like, do you know anything about, like cyber insurance premiums? Like, have those been pretty consistent over the past 12 months? Like, what are you seeing there?
Yeah. So there is, still what people are calling a soft market where premiums are not going up in the same rate as I would say, incidents are happening. And there's still a wide berth for giving insurance, binding insurance. So, I mean, I do think I have to assume that within the next couple of years, we're definitely going to see not only an increase in premiums, but also an increase in required controls to get insurance, where it's not just going to be, a checkbox of I have this or I don't have this, where it might actually be, things like pen testing or um, different types of outside investigations into your environment to get that insurance, where it's been a little easier
Yeah.
historically.
That makes sense. Yeah, I feel like for the longest time, like especially when like the cyber insurance was brand new, there was so much unknown where like you saw providers dropping out, like we don't want to do it, or people losing coverage and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I know for us, like we obviously have cyber insurance, and every year like the questionnaire gets longer and longer and longer and longer and longer as we want more coverage. We need to provide more documentation. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon, which is good because it should be like that. But it's yeah, for smaller organizations, they get a cyber insurance question. Like, I don't even like where do I even start with this thing?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you really have to do that, collaboration piece between management, operations, and technology to make sure that you're giving the right answers to, because, that's something that we don't like to see is insurance is coverage disclaimed because you've reported the wrong information.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, my friend, it is 12:31. So one last question. Um, if you've already have all of these things that we talked about, why do you still need a pen test?
Great question. Um,
Not set up for you at all.
yeah, not so, no, I would, yeah, just not specifically for me, just in general. Like, why do we need to do pen testing? There's a bunch of reasons. So, I mean, I always tell people like, you want to like get hacked before you get hacked, So, you can have defenses and controls in place, but a threat actor is going to profile each organization differently, and you need to know what a threat actor can or a hacker can see, do, and potentially exploit in your organization and your environment. And the other thing is like you want to test controls, you want to test policies, you want to test procedures, but you also want to test defenses. So, you go and you implement an EDR and you have, someone managing it. It's like, okay, well, are you testing to make sure that they're actually doing what's on their service level, their SLA? Uh, if not, why aren't we testing that? Why aren't we making sure they're doing that? Why aren't we making sure that everything's configured correctly? And if we put mock ransomware on a device, that's going to detect it and isolate and do everything it's supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of reasons for pen testing. There's compliance, there's regulations, there's boxes to check. But my favorite reason to do pen testing is like we just want to be secure. We just want to know what hackers can see and find about us and do. And we want to make sure that the good guys find it before the bad guys find it, because the good guys will give us a report and the bad guys will give us ransomware.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there's so much value to it. And essentially a ransomware attack or other cybersecurity event is a pen test, but with a bad outcome.
Yeah.
So, when an organization says, I don't want to spend a certain amount of money on pen testing, well, that's fine. But if you have an incident, um, you're going through very much the same exercise, except you're going through it for the next year. It's not like, pen testing, what's your average time frame for doing a, soup to nuts pen test exercise?
It's usually about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it depends. Like someone's probably like for small to mid-size, a week to 2 weeks is really where we're at. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd much rather spend a week to 2 weeks figuring out, where the holes are now, as opposed to having that incident, figuring out then going through all the notification obligations, the data mining, all of the things that could potentially take a year of your business life. So
Yeah, definitely. And
do
the
it
other thing
now.
is like, yeah, and compliance isn't going away. So like there's industries that we work with now where 10 years ago, I was like, hey, let's get into manufacturing, let's get into car dealerships. Like we don't, we never do a pen test. Like we don't need any of this. And now there's, all these acts and compliance and cyber insurance. That's like, where's your pen tests? And we're getting more and more industries trickling in, which is why I always tell people like, you're going to have to do it at some point. And the last thing you want to do is to have a customer or a contract waiting a pen test. And then you go out and get it. And the results are, hey, there's a lot of vulnerabilities. So you got to patch it. And then you're in panic mode of like, we got to do all this in order to get this insurance policy or get this customer or win this contract. So that's something that we deal with a lot. And those are a lot tougher conversations than the people that are proactive. And then we have time
Yeah.
to kind of, remediate stuff and fix and retest and do all the stuff that we love to do.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there, because although, we're talking financial services here today, I'm going to say at one point this year, at least half of my clients were manufacturing, and construction, small business, that type of thing. So it's every organization. And organizations that think they don't have any data, well, they have all their employee data. They have, there's so much. So it doesn't, nobody's immune.
Yeah, there's always data to be like we do work with like NFL teams, like well, what do you want?
Yeah.
What does an NFL team have? Like they have financial data, they have tons of data, and they also have roster data. Like, do you think about the gambling scene in NFL? Like if you somehow roster data or health data is leaked, that could impact a lot on betting. So we've been seeing a huge uptick in that type of activity as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. All
Wow.
right. We went over, which is the norm. So, Elizabeth, Joe, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, guys. Gosh, I learned a lot today. I'm not a very techy person, and your Q&A really, really helped me out. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
I don't see, let me check the chat function here and Q&A. I don't see any questions for you guys. So again, thank you very much. And we'll see Jackie next week. And James, you guys both have a nice holiday as well.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thanks for having me,
Thanks,
guys. Take
guys.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.